How has this student handled the challenge of looking at two sources in one answer? We have source D and we have source E. This is related to the Arab-Israeli conflict or the search for peace in the Middle East. We have one being a speech by the Israeli Prime Minister when the Oslo Accords were signed in 1993. A year later, we have a cartoon from a British newspaper suggesting that there is an unequal relationship between the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, and the leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat. So here the student goes. Source D, presented by the Israeli Prime Minister as he signed the Oslo Accords. Great. We know the origin of the first source then. And we know when it was as he was signing, so that's the date reference there, heard by both Palestinians and Israelis, so suggesting that the audience is both sides here, was his claim for a desire for peace. In saying that the Israelis harbored no hatred towards you, the Palestinians, in source D, he makes it clear the conflict of the past fighting the Palestinians and how the Israeli soldiers have seen our relatives and friends killed before our eyes. This is getting to motive, also talking about the tone and the language of the source, because you need to get straight to the analysis, or quite soon to the analysis, when you're dealing with more than one source. Source E, looking back on the Accords a year later, we have a different date for the second source, presenting a criticism of the Accords and faith in them as peace-bringing to the British public uninvolved in this conflict, is in complete contrast to source D. That might be a bit of a confusing sentence, but we don't mind too much because you're under pressure of the exam conditions here. But it's a criticism, okay? This is the motive. This could also be said to be the bias of the second source. And it's got a different audience, the British public. Uninvolved in this conflict is an interesting way to put it. They're interested observers. Complete contrast to source D. Where Rabin would portray the sides as equals, that's this source here. If you had time, you would look through that and look at his language. Bell in his cartoon makes clear he sees this as a meeting of, not as a meeting of equals, but as one country using their significant military power, as we can see here, to force the other into agreement. So this really is getting to the tone of the cartoon. It's ridiculous to have someone sitting in a tank shaking hands with someone in a toy car. The fact that the tiny Palestinian toy car is actually sitting on the Israelis' tank emphasizes the power imbalance and indicates who has all the control. So this is how we can call this language. I know it's not language because it's an image, but this is the equivalent to language in a cartoon or a photograph or a picture. The piece is clearly making a satire of the agreements. This is clear reference to tone. Also, idea of it being an opinion. No one who saw an agreement made by people actually in a tank and toy car would think that it was fair or that the agreement would be upheld. Right, so we've covered the first source and the second source, in this case without a summing up sentence, which probably would have added a few points to this, but this is still a strong response.